Interesting bit of news here. Oleksandr Gvozdyk is preparing for a comeback. Now, Gvozdyk, of course, was WBC light heavyweight champion. He wrestled the title from long-time champion Adonis Stevenson, and Stevenson was badly injured after that fight. He suffered a brain injury, but fortunately for him, he was able to recover, and he made one of the better recoveries from brain injury that you'll see in boxing, alongside somebody like Spencer Oliver, who also had a brain injury way back in the days in a European title fight. I think it was a bantamweight title fight, and he made pretty much a full recovery. I'm sure Spencer Oliver, he's spoken about this actually, does still suffer from certain neurological problems due to obviously the injury and also the surgery, which, they're having to open up your skull to operate on your brain. So he still suffers certain issues, I think, like headaches or, certain things. And I'd imagine it will be the same with Adonis Stevenson. He will still suffer certain symptoms, but those aside, he's made a full recovery. He can walk around and, do normal stuff, which is unfortunately not the norm when fighters suffer brain injuries. Nick Blackwell's another one. He also is apparently okay. Most fighters who suffer that kind of injury, they're never the same again. We think of Gerald McClellan, Michael Watson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And some fighters lose their lives, but Adonis Stevenson was able to make pretty much a full recovery, thankfully. Gvozdyk went on to attempt to unify with Artur Beterbiev, and he lost that fight. He got stopped by Beterbiev in the amateurs, and for me, he looked afraid of Beterbiev in that professional contest from very early on. The way he was moving around the ring, the look on his face, he just looked like an intimidated man. And Beterbiev looked like a guy who knew that his opponent was intimidated. And if you succumb to fear, then the things that you fear will actually get you more often than not. And look, there's no guarantee that if you purge fear from your mind and from your heart that you're going to win, but you'll give yourself a better chance if you're not stricken by fear. Now, obviously, you need a certain amount of nerves, right, to keep you sharp, or at least some fighters do. Some fighters don't operate well on nerves. They need to be completely relaxed. But a lot of fighters, they need nerves to keep them sharp and get them up for fights, right? There are different personality types. But again, if it's like a crippling fear, you're usually not going to do well. And I don't want to say it was a crippling fear for Gvozdyk against Beterbiev, but I could see it. It was on his face, it was in his body language, it was in the way he boxed. And some people say that he quit in the fight. I mean, he didn't officially quit. He didn't get down on one knee and not get up, as far as I remember. Been a long time since I saw it. But to me, he mentally caved in that fight. He wasn't someone that went down swinging. He mentally caved in before the fight was over. So I always felt that would probably really hurt him mentally, having that nightmare revisited, because it would have been a nightmare in the amateurs against Beterbiev, and then the nightmare occurred again in the pros. And then he decided to retire straight after it when he was still a young man. I think, what is he, in his late 20s, early 30s at the time when he retired? So, I always thought that was kind of curious. And again, that plays into this idea, this notion that maybe he isn't the mentally strongest guy out there. I'm not saying he's mentally weak, quote unquote, but compared to some other fighters out there, he's maybe not as robust as they are mentally. But after some time off, he is apparently deciding to come back because he put out on social media that he's in training and he can make weight within a month. So Gvozdyk apparently coming back to boxing. A very talented fighter, good mover, decent puncher, very skilled, extensive amateur background, former world champion, obviously. Beat Adonis Stevenson in a good fight, by the way. Stopped him late. So it was disappointing, to be honest, that he decided to retire after the Beterbiev fight. But maybe he felt like this Beterbiev guy is like the boogeyman or the bogeyman, as British people say. He's like the bogeyman for me. I can't get rid of this guy. I can't, wherever I go, he's there. You know what I mean? I'm hoping that maybe he turns pro at cruiserweight, but no, he turns pro and he's staying at light heavyweight. Do you know what I mean? Perhaps that was going through Gvozdyk's mind. Like, he just can't get rid of this Beterbiev guy out of his life. Wherever he turns, he's there. And maybe he just felt there's no point in continuing on his career at light heavyweight because he's not going to be able to get through Beterbiev. But now we have a certain Mr. Dmitry Bivol on the scene. Now, he was on the scene at the time when Gvozdyk was fighting, but he hadn't beaten the likes of Canelo. So maybe Gvozdyk is looking at Dmitry Bivol and thinking, I can beat him. You know, he's a different guy than Artur Beterbiev. Also, Beterbiev's older now, a couple years older than when he beat Gvozdyk. Maybe he's thinking Beterbiev's not going to be around for that long, or maybe he's looking to see what happens in a unification between Beterbiev and Bivol. Let's say Bivol beats Beterbiev in a unification. Gvozdyk is then probably going to think, okay, let me fight Bivol. It'll be a boxing match, right? He's probably not going to knock me out. So I fancy my chances more against him in that style than I would against Beterbiev. I suspect, again, I'm speculating here, I suspect that's what's going on in Oleksandr Gvozdyk's mind. You know, could be wrong. Maybe there are other factors that I'm not aware of. Maybe there are things going on in his personal life. And maybe there were things going on in his personal life around the time of the Artur Beterbiev fight. Maybe he was trying to get out of a contract. Sometimes fighters are not happy in the contracts they're in, and so they'll just take a hiatus for a couple years, like Mikey Garcia, when he was with, I think it was with Bob Arum, and he had some kind of legal issue with Arum, and he just stayed out the ring for 2 years. Then when he came back, he was no longer in contract. So sometimes fighters do that. Was that the case with Gvozdyk? I believe Gvozdyk is a Bob Arum fighter as well, or was a top-ranked fighter as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. So who knows what the situation is? I'm just speculating here. Maybe it's a combination of all of the above. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section below about Oleksandr Gvozdyk potentially coming back to boxing. Do you welcome him coming back? Were you somebody that rated him highly? And how do you think he would do against the likes of Dmitry Bivol, potentially a Beterbiev rematch? And, well, there are several other fighters around right now, aren't there, in the light heavyweight division that could make an interesting matchup for this guy. So, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below.